In this conversation, I speak with Miss G, who I met on Twitter. She talks a lot about flirting, but I found that the way that she talks about flirting really leads to a lot of other things, like how you pay attention and how you feel gratitude and what wisdom is. And so in this conversation, we talk about all of those things, as well as her story and how she learned these different things in her own life and how she shares them with the world through her coaching and on Twitter. And I so enjoyed this conversation and hope you will as well. Hi, Miss G. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
So there's a lot we can talk about today, and I would just love to hear you start by revealing the mystery of who you are and where you come from, because, I'm just so impressed with you. And like, recently people had on Twitter, like putting their age in their handle and you put in 24. And I was like, holy shit, there's so much wisdom here coming out of this woman. And I just am dying to know who you are, where you come from, how you became so wise. Like, tell me everything about you.
Oh my gosh, you are too kind. So I was born in India. I was raised in the Middle East in Dubai, and then I moved to New York. And so it's kind of, I think a bunch of it is just like having a lot of rich experiences like at a really young age. And lots of like, lots of like different kinds of pain. I think a lot of wisdom is earned. So if people ascribe it to me, I usually just, I'm like, that's really great. And I super appreciate you saying that. But it was earned from like having to figure it out, right? Like if I didn't have those experiences in my life, I probably wouldn't have been who I am now, which I mean, in a way it's great, but I think that's what it is, that like I had a bunch of stuff happen, like, with my childhood and like moving around a lot and with my parents and a bunch of stuff. So I think that's kind of where it all comes from, just like having a lot of rich experiences at a really, really young age, all like crammed up together. So I feel like I've lived like 50 years already, and I'm tired. I'm 24 and I'm I'm a little exhausted now. But like I guess I like, I have something to offer, hopefully. So in that way it's great. I really appreciate you saying that.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, I don't know, any of the kind of like formative stories for you that helped you like acquire that wisdom, as it were?
Yeah. So I was like raised in a pretty like conservative-ish situation.
Mm.
I was born into a spiritual cult, so there was that, and I got out of that when I was about 16, 17. I started thinking that it was a little bit contradictory. I think one of the wisest things someone said to me recently was that religion can be very useful to, give you community and give you principles and values to like try to get to, but it starts making less sense when there are internal contradictions that you start noticing. And I thought that was really incredible. Like that's exactly what happened with my spiritual upbringing. I learned so many incredible things, and I was raised by a community of people, which I needed because my parents were a little, one of them was absent and one of them was abusive, so like I needed other people to raise me, and I'm still very grateful for that. But there were a lot of internal contradictions which come with being a human. Like there was the concept of service. It's called seva, and it's the most noble and charitable thing to do with your life. Like it's the most immense kind of prayer. I don't I'm trying to like translate the Hindi word into English, but like it's the most like, deep form of prayer is doing service to other people, um, doing service for other people. And so I just noticed that like there were politics in that, and there were hierarchies of sevadars, like someone was better than the other person and someone would get more hours and other people wouldn't get that many. And I was like, this is a little bit weird. And a lot of these people are just kind of there to inflict power and to inflict control onto other people in the name of religion, in the name of spirituality. And I started not liking going anymore. So it kind of got my dad and my sibling out of it around then. And my mom was sick when I was 9. She had kidney failure. And so I kind of raised myself and my sibling, who was 7 years younger than I was. So there was that. My dad was always with my mom. Obviously, it made sense. So I was really like mostly just like kind of alone a lot of the time. So I was like the third parent of the household. Like I did everything else. And I think it's stuff like that, just like added up all over like over the course of my life. And then I moved to New York when I was 18, and I realized that I didn't really know who I was. Obviously, I was 18 years old. I had no idea, but I thought I did. I'm so sorry. I'm going to switch off this. Right. So I thought I did. I thought I understood who I was. And then I moved to New York, and I came to be more myself than I ever thought I could be, almost. Like, I was raised in a conservative Indian household in a Muslim country. I had no concept of actually liking myself. I had a lot of body image issues. Pretty much any issue you could think of, I had it. I just didn't know that I had it. And moving to New York was incredible. I met some amazing people. I met some terrible people. The terrible people kind of helped in their own way and made me realize that I needed to be very careful with who I let into my life. So it's just like a bunch of crazy experiences, one after the other, just all the time, constantly. I think a lot of the times I would whine to my dad. Like, I was like, I would just like to be bored for 1 year, just 1 year of just being very bored, nothing excitable, nothing happens, no growth. I'm done. I'm tired of growth. I don't want to grow anymore. I would just like to just be bored. And it never happened. But every single year, I mean, I could just go on forever, but like every single year till 24, I've had something or the other happen. Last year, the pandemic happened, and I had a bunch of plans for my life, and all of them went to shit. And I moved back here. My dad got COVID. My uncle died. He was my closest uncle. So it's always been something or the other. And the only way I've been able to get through all of it is to just be like, okay, that wasn't great, but what did we learn from that? Like, what is the lesson that we got from it? And I think that just kind of adds to any kind of knowledge that people perceive that I might have, is just that there's only so much that you can do about it, right? Like, or you would just be paralyzed with the unfairness of it all. Like, it would just be crushing, and you would just be like, you know what, I'm tired. Like, this is not worth doing anymore, and this is not fair, and I don't deserve this. And then I would just not be able to live my life. So the only way I could deal with it is to be like, okay, that sucked. Let's deal with that. Let's feel our feelings, and let's try to figure out how we can learn something from it. Or I would just be lying in bed all the time, just like, this sucks. I want to be here.
When you had these difficult experiences and kind of like learned from them and looked back and was like, what lesson did I learn? How did you make sure that you sort of internalize the lessons from your experience?
That's a great question. Because internalizing something and like knowing it are such different things. Knowing something is like, okay, I know this, but like, how do I integrate it into my system? And I think I might ascribe that to finding the right people to surround myself with. I'm incredibly blessed to have friends who are my soulmates, and I know that for a fact. And I have like 15 of them, which not a lot of people can say that. Like, I genuinely believe this. Like, my friends are my soulmates. I found them at a really young age in a city of 8 million people. That doesn't make sense. That's crazy. It took me a while to find them, but they are, they're the loves of my life. And I think it's because that they were around me that they kind of reinforced the things that I was trying to learn by bringing them back to me almost. Like, I think Visa talks about this, that the best way to manage your knowledge is to have good friends, is to tell them the things that you think, and then they always come back to you with the same thing. The number of times I've had some issues and I've been whining to a friend and they give me verbatim the same advice that I gave them a year ago, and I'm like, you're just telling me what I told you. And they're like, yeah, you already know this. Like, just do the thing that you said I should do. And I was like, damn it. It's true. Like, I stored all of my knowledge in some incredible people that have no issues, whacking me in the face with it when I need it. And it's because it comes from a great place of love. It's because they love me completely. It's the kind of love that I hadn't experienced before I met them. And they're my family. So I think that's why. I think it's because every time I would lose my way, which happens because I'm a human being, I would like move back into patterns that weren't great for me. I was able to be like, I'm trying to do this thing. Can you help me? And they were like, absolutely. And even the way to ask for help, something I didn't know how to do that ever. I ended up in, really terrible situations mental health wise because I couldn't ask for help. I didn't know how.
Mm.
So even that was because of them, that they insisted on providing help and on noticing me and paying attention to me and being like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, you seem a little bit off. And I was like, I didn't even know I was off, but now that you say it, yeah, I'm not doing so good.
Mm.
Thank you for asking. They were the first people I cried in front of. Like, I had never done that before in my life, cried in front of anyone ever. And it was unbelievably vulnerable and intimate to me. And I was able to do that in like a Starbucks on campus with other people around. But because my best friend was there, I kept saying sorry. And she was like, why? You feel things and it's fine. Like, don't apologize to me. That's what I'm here for. And she said, like, how can I make you feel good right now? And I just remember that moment of like, you care about making me feel good? Like, that's
Mm.
crazy to me. And she was like, you've been doing that for me for 4 years. You just don't say it out loud, but you do it. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, I had no idea. So I think it's because of them. It's because they're the greatest people in the world and I'm obsessed with them. And I found
Mm.
amazing people. So yeah, I found the friendly, ambitious nerds like in my life.
Amazing, amazing. That's such a good answer. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I just asked because like I often feel like I'm learning a lesson from life and receiving wisdom, and then I'll forget it and not apply it. And variable success there sometimes more than other times. But that's it makes sense that that's how you internalized the wisdom, is having
yeah.
friends that just remind you when you need it. Um,
Like,
yeah,
hello, you told me this 6 months ago. Just like do the
yeah.
thing that you told me to do. And I'm like, oh, right. Correct.
This
You are
does
not wrong.
sound familiar. Uh,
Seems like I said it. Yeah, you did say it. Here's a screenshot of you saying it to me. Oh God.
oh man, wow. So tell me about like in this sort of in your personal life, how flirting entered the picture and what your own flirting journey was.
Right. Um, yeah, so I think it starts from like the fact that when I was in school, I was like known for being, how do I put this? A bitch. I was known for
Mm.
being a bitch. Like, I was intimidating, I was bitchy. And looking back, I think it's just, it was a girl who was confident and like wanted to do things with her life. And that always comes off as bitchy and intimidating. And intimidating was the number one word that like boys in my school used to describe me.
Mm.
And I internalized the hell out of that back then. I was like, fine, I guess I am then. And I was a tomboy and didn't appreciate my femininity. I was like, oh, I hate pink. And
Mm.
I can't hang out with girls. Like, they're too much drama, which is ridiculous. My girlfriends are the greatest, blessings in my life. But back then I was trying super hard to hide because I didn't like how I was perceived. And then on top of that, somehow I was slut shamed throughout all of high school, which like was very contradictory and didn't make sense. So I felt really like, like, I can't do this. I can't date people. I can't like people. This is not for me. Because already people have such varying perceptions of me and I'm just trying to get through high school. Being popular is being well liked and being well known. I had people who were in camps. They were like, I hate her or I love her. There was no in between.
Mm.
And so it's exhausting for a teenager, especially with everything going on in my house. Like, it was a bunch. And I look back at that and I'm like, how did I do any of that? Like, that to make it out of there and like move to New York, I have no idea how I did that. Kudos to young me. She was a bad bitch. I have no idea how she figured that out. But when I got to New York, I was like, I can do whatever I want. No one knows me. Like, no one has any preconceived notions of who I am or anything. And I wasn't like completely aware of who I was as a person, right? Like, I was 18. So I had a narrative of who I was. And then, other people perceived me. And I had no idea that I was very flirty and I had no concept of that. I was like, no, I just like people and like they're nice and I like talking to them and that's kind of it. That was not the case. I did not know that the way that I was, was like particularly loquacious or charming or any of that. Like I ascribed those specific qualities to literally anyone that wasn't me, to the point where I found the friends who were like, let's talk about how you perceive yourself versus how literally everyone else does. And that doesn't mean that like they're right, but you do have, there's like a gap between what I see myself as and like what other people see myself as. Like the same thing of like, when I'm like, you should just look in the mirror and be like, yeah, like who's that? Holy shit! Like wow, that's one sexy ass motherfucker. You need to actually believe it, right? Like I didn't believe any of that. Like I was just like, I'm just like a nerdy dorky person, and like sometimes it works out. And I looked back later on, and I was like, you had a lot of successes with people when you were flirting with them or at parties or whatever. Like I had a lot of successes, but I didn't ascribe them to me. And then I had some very well-meaning friends who are obviously straight men who are like, I feel like you're leading people on sometimes with like the way that you are. And obviously I felt bad. I was like, I'm not trying to hurt people. Like that's not what I'm trying to accomplish. But it came up enough that I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to be more careful. And I kind of shut down in that place again. And it kind of took me back to high school where I was like, oh, I guess I just can't be myself because I'm hurting other people. And I didn't know that I was hurting them. And then I came on Twitter. I've been on Twitter since 2012, but I was private. And then I met Visa and he changed my life. And I went public like in December, I think, of last year. And I was just being myself and felt comfortable doing that because I was like, well, no one's gonna like yell at me. Like no one knows me. I have like 400 followers. Like it doesn't matter. And the more I was just like, I find people delightful. I like talking to them. And I happen to be on the side of Twitter where people are incredible, like top tier human beings. So I was obviously like, oh my God, everyone is so hot. Holy shit. Like, how am I supposed to not flirt with all of you? That's insane. Like, no one should expect this of me. And so I was, I just flirted a lot. I was like, yeah, I'm going to flirt with everybody. And people didn't get mad at me for the first time. And they didn't see me as leading them on or anything like that because it was the internet. So people weren't like, oh, she's thinking, she's like, I thought she meant something, but no, I did. It's the internet. You can't be taking me seriously. That doesn't, I think there was a balance that I struck there where like, I was genuinely like very interested in them as people, but they weren't like, oh, this person's trying to get into my pants because I can't,
Right.
because we don't, it's the internet. So that really helped. I was like, oh, people see me for who I am and they like it. They actually enjoy that part of me. And I wrote about, it was like a random tweet where I was like, I used to always be like, oh my God, I'm just being friendly. Like I'm not leading people on. But now I realized, no, I just am flirting all the time, 24/7, constantly. It's not my fault everyone's sexy. That's on you. That's not my problem. You didn't want to be flirted with. You shouldn't have been sexy. Sounds like a you problem. You should have fixed that. That's not on me. So I was joking, but I was like sort of like, I'm not going to stop being who I am because other people don't know how to manage their feelings. I'm not going to manage them for them. Like I have like, complex PTSD and everything. And I've been managing feelings my whole life. For the first time, I was like, actually, I could just choose to not do that anymore. I give myself permission to not manage someone else's feelings around me. I'm just going to do what I'm doing and try to make sure that I'm being kind and warm and supportive. And that's where my role ends in this interaction. It takes two people. I'm not everybody's mom. So,
Totally.
And people reacted really well to that. And I was like,
what?
It's great.
Yeah.
I love validation. It's fantastic. And so I just started doing more of it and I started introspecting more about what flirting meant to me and, why it felt wrong to me when people said that I was leading them on or leading other people on because their concept of flirting was just different from mine. I had a very specific model for what it was. And since I was thinking about it so much on the internet, I started introspecting a lot more and writing about it. And I really, really figured out what my model was and like why I felt how I felt about who I was, and like I fully accept myself for who I am. So like shout out Twitter for that.
Mm,
That's because of Twitter.
hmm.
But that's kind of where, that's kind of the long like journey of accepting myself and who I am, and expressing my femininity and being comfortable with who I am, and not caring if I'm not everyone's cup of tea. That's okay. That's fine.
Mm,
I can't be. Everyone's not my cup of tea. So
mm.
um
Well, and somehow, of course, like when you step into that, like being okay with not being everyone's cup of tea, it just makes you that much more lovely. So, um, yeah, but let's talk
I
about,
agree.
yeah, let's talk about your concept of flirting, because I think this is really one of the biggest things that I've personally learned from you is like the concept that I had of flirting and how I understand it now is just totally different. And I would be curious to hear you speak to that, of like how you understand it now, having done all this introspection and practice and like all of these shifts. What is flirting, and also like why does it matter so much? It's surprising how much it matters. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think it's tied into so much stuff. Like flirting is it's kind of the mask on top of self-love and inner
Mm,
work and loving other people and compassion. And so it's a bunch of stuff actually. And it's so interesting how much it's meant to me over the last few months that I've been introspecting more about it. I'm like, wow, this is like actually a really big part of who I am, but I've never like looked at it in this way. But it's like I had the knowledge inside of me. It just kind of bubbled up because of everybody on Twitter. But flirting to me is it's giving people a gift. It's it's two thes. Most of all, it is paying attention, which is like my like number one talking point. Is like paying attention, pay attention, pay attention. And I wish that I want to figure out a better way to say it than paying attention, but like for now, that's what I say. And two, it is getting in touch with your curiosity and then channeling it towards other people. And those two things combined is a massive gift that you get to give other people, because you make them feel seen and heard and like they're a real person. It's like almost a grounding thing that you get to give someone else. You get to make them feel solid. And that is an incredible gift that you get to give other people. And none of my flirting came from a place of wanting anything from people. Like that's why it really surprised me when people were like, you're leading this person on. I was like, I don't even want anything from them. Like, why am I leading them on? I just think that they're cool. And I told them that to their face. That's kind of it, really. So I think it's that like when you pay really good attention to people, like really like look at them and then tell them that you see them and tell them the things that you see, and usually they're compliments because people are delightful. And so when you train yourself to notice beauty, and then you just start seeing it everywhere and everyone, and it becomes second nature, then it just kind of you're just like, I want to tell people like I have all this love inside of me. It's love, really. It's and people have this like really grand notions of love, which is fine. But yeah, my notion of love is, in terms of flirting, it's a form of love. You give people love, and it's unconditional, really. You meet someone for 3 minutes at a party and you remember that they like red wine the next time they come to a party. That's love. You remember something about them. You paid attention to them. They feel seen. They feel like, oh, like I took up space in this person's mind. They like remember this thing about me. That's loving. That's something that, you care about someone. That's compassion. You care about them. And it doesn't have to be anything more than that. But I think that's what flirting means to me, is really giving them a gift of like, I love you. You're so great. Like, wow, this is amazing. I want nothing from you at all. I am outcome independent with who you are as a person or any sort of relationship. I just want you to know that I think you're incredible. And whatever it might be, I would, since I was in New York, there's a lot of people. It's easy to practice, and it's easy to like fall on your face a lot as well, which I think was important for me in terms of like figuring out what's going on. But I pretty consistently, pretty often actually, every time I was outside, and I was outside every single day, would always like end up complimenting someone on the street, on the subway, at a cafe, something or the other, because I almost felt like I didn't have any control over it. I was like, oh my God, that person is gorgeous. I need to go tell them right now. like immediately, like they need to know. And no one hates that. Well, I think it's easier because I'm a pretty girl. So like, a pretty
Mm,
girl comes up to you and is like, hey, you're very handsome. And I just wanted to let you know. And that's kind of it really. And have a great day. No one hates that. And there's no pressure on them to do anything about it because I don't want anything from you. I just think you're hot and I want you to know that you're hot. And that's kind of really it. And sometimes it leads to, people asking you out or you finding like an incredible friend really on the street where they're like, oh my God, shut up. I was thinking that about you. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And it's just really nice and wonderful. And people have
mm,
such a capacity to just share this with each other all the time. Like ideally, everyone is flirting 24/7 all the time
mm.
with everybody, as we should. I think it's lovely. With no attachment to any outcomes with each other. You just go with the flow and see what happens, but just tell them that you think they're great because most people are. I think everyone has goodness in them. So I think I'm done. It was
Mm,
my ranting. But
mm,
that's what I think it is. At least that's the way that I happen to practice it and the way that I happen to tell people and teach them and try to coach them along.
mhm, mhm. Oh man. Yeah, there's just so much in there, and like it just unfolds in terms of how you're seeing yourself and the other person and the relationship, and that you're not expecting anything, but you're giving this gift and you're paying attention to them. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think I'd be really curious to dive into hear more about this uh, aspect of paying attention to someone. And I totally agree. It would be lovely to find a different way to talk about that. But I think that sort of overlaps with my own interests, just coming from a meditation background and contemplative practice of like really cultivating a relationship to paying attention to anything, whether it's a person or just your breath or your body or what emotions are present in the body or anything like that. And I would be curious to hear about your own relationship to like paying attention to something, whether it's, people when you're flirting, or I know you talk about like romanticizing domesticity as well, like just paying attention to like the small things that you have to do anyway in your life, and just hear about your relationship to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, all of my talking points are like tied into each other like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, so when I was a kid, again, I was raised in a spiritual cult, and we would have satsang, which is,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's like a, I think in churches they have like, Sunday mass, and they have a priest like telling you stuff like how to be a good person. So we had that every Friday. And when we were kids, like, they didn't put us in the adult lecture hall. They put us in childcare, and we had aunties, and in Indian culture, everyone's an auntie. They don't have to be related to you. And they would do like little skits and plays for kids. And I loved it. It was my favorite thing ever. I would wake up super early to get to satsang at 7 in the morning, and it was my favorite thing to do ever. And they would often, like, all the aunties knew me. They basically raised me. So they would be like, okay, you know what? Like, call her. She's going to do a skit about gratitude or a skit about enthusiasm or whatever. And so every week we would have a virtue that they would choose. And then we would do exercises and plays and, have a little lecture and just learn about that virtue, and how we can embody it into our lives. And I think, honestly, um, that should have been the case for the adults too. Like, it was an incredible experience for me, and I still remember it very fondly. Honesty is the best policy, and like zeal and enthusiasm for life is good, and like gratitude is the foundation for life. And that really stuck with me, because I still remember one of my aunties was doing a satsang, and she said, when you say thank you to God, he hears little bells in his ears, and it's a really beautiful sound, and he appreciates it, and you get to make music for this person that's brought you into the world. So I would recommend that you do it all the time. And it really, really, I was like 6 years old, but it really stuck with me. It was kind of a magical image that she'd given me, and I still carry it with me. Um, and so since then, I've always had a constant stream in my head of, today's a really nice day. Thanks, Babaji. I used to call him Babaji. So like, thank you. Or like, I was just constantly all the time, like, I didn't miss the bus. And I would look up and be like, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just did that all the time. And then, I went on my own journey that had less to do with God and more to do with like, spirituality and energy and all of that. But I still carried that with me always. And I think when I was in college, I struggled with a lot of stuff. But at some point, I just remembered like it was such a part of my life that I hadn't even noticed it. Like I was like, yeah, you say thank you all the time. I was like, oh, right. Like gratitude is like the foundation of my entire personality. Like that's kind of just who I am. Like my friends, whenever they're imitating me, would be like, guys, I'm so grateful for you. And it's just like so amazing. And like, I love you all so much, because I'm like that all the time. I'm always crying about shit. And I think that's what ties into paying attention. When you're grateful, you need to pay attention to be grateful. Like that's kind of the main thing. You can't be grateful for things that you don't actually notice. So when you start noticing, you can't stop almost, like, because it feels so good. It feels amazing in your body to be grateful. There have been times in my life when I've been so overwhelmed with gratitude that I've just like cried for hours, just like, I can't believe this happened to me. This is so amazing. And everyone's like, you're so ridiculous. Like, I love you, but like, oh my God. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, it's kind of like, you know, having a big picture view of everything. You're like, this doesn't make sense. Like the fact that we are in New York City, a city that's well known for being very lonesome for people. You know, a lot of people are lonely in New York. It's not an easy place to make friends. It's a hard city. To have like 15 friends that you could call at any point and be like, yo, I'm having a bad day. Can we go and hang out on a rooftop or something? And so I can cry about it. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go get a beer and let's like fucking chill. Like, I know that it sounds super, you know, it's whatever. It's not whatever to me though, because I didn't have friends like that before in my life. And now I have so many of them, and they're all incredibly loving and care about me despite any flaws or mistakes, which is not a kind of love that I knew before. So I think it's insane. And I think it's a blessing that I have that many people in my life in a city where people are mostly lonely. I was never lonely in New York. That was never a thing that I ever said about myself. Well, like romantically maybe, because you know that happens, but friend wise I was never lonely. I always had someone there. And so I think that's where that paying attention things come from. When you're in a city where so many things are happening, you have blinders on, you're like, I need to get from A to B, I have things to do, I have people to see, I can't focus on stuff, like I just need to, you know, I'm just doing this one thing. You miss so much. But when you start paying attention, you're like overwhelmed almost by how much stuff you have to be grateful for. And then you just can't stop. It feels really incredible to feel that grateful. And that's where like the paying attention thing comes from. When you pay attention, it just feels good. Like you should do it because it feels amazing. And you know, this is the same thing with meditation. I was actually in my you know spiritual upbringing, meditation was like the number one thing. My parents every night would meditate for 2 hours, and I would take my little baby pillow and like sit on there, because we would do the, what's it called, you know, when you like sit like this, like Indians sit like this a lot, like with their legs crossed. So like we're really comfortable with that. So that's how my parents would meditate, and I would take my little pillow and put it on my dad's lap and just go to bed, because he was meditating, and then he would like pick me up and put me on the bed.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, so that was like most of my life as a kid. And so meditation was like super, like it was like a big part of my life. So I think those two things really, you know, they've made me who I am now as a person. Like meditating means paying attention, like listen to yourself and like pay attention to your breath. And that's really it. Like just pay attention to stuff. And it's kind of easy to say. And I try to validate when people are like, yeah, it's hard. But honestly, it's not. It's like second nature once you figure it out. It's really
well,
easy.
I think that the part about gratitude is key, because if you, at least in my experience, if you try to just pay attention, especially to something neutral like the breath or body sensations or something, without that aspect of gratitude, then it's like neutral at best, or like slightly enjoyable. You can make it enjoyable, but it's an art, and it took me years to learn how to do that personally. But when you add in that gratitude, like the feedback loop starts, and you're enjoying it, and it's fun, and you want to do it. So at least that's been my experience with that.
Yeah, I agree, because it feels good. It's like I don't want to have any negative connotations with like what gratitude feels like, but really it kind of feels like you're high, you know, like you're high on gratitude. Like
yeah,
it
definitely.
just suffuses your entire body. Like it just, every cell feels it. And even thinking about it, I'm like I feel good just even talking about it. I'm like, oh, it feels so good. Why wouldn't you do it all the time? And sometimes it's hard because, you know, life gets really rough. And that's kind of why that kind of ties into the domestic drudgery thing, right? Like romanticize domestic drudgery, romanticize small little things that you have to do every day, because sometimes life is really hard and, you know, big things are going wrong and there's a pandemic. Like, it would
Mhm.
be insane of me to be like, you should find things to be grateful for. Like, no, stuff is hard. Like, it's really, really rough. And I know it's hard. So that's why paying attention to small things really, really helps, because those things aren't going away. Those things you have to do every day anyway. You have to make yourself a cup of coffee every single day. You might as well start feeling grateful for it so it feels really good. And it kind of keeps the practice of gratitude going for you. Because otherwise, you know, so obviously I have days where I can't bring myself to feel grateful for anything. I'm just like, everything is terrible. And or, you know, honestly, even feeling terrible at least feels like something. But
Mhm.
sometimes I don't feel anything because life happens and I get very numb and I hate it. It's very frustrating. I just don't feel anything at all. And those days I go outside and take a walk and just I just try to find one thing that I like, just one. Just like, oh, there's like a new flower that I didn't see last time on this walk. I'm really grateful that I got to see it this time. And it makes me feel literally 10% better, but it adds up for the rest of the day. And then by the end of it, it's a completely different day for me. I'm like, that's great. I'm glad I did that. It makes me feel a lot better. I think
What are
that's where like the
some
intention thing comes from. Yeah.
what are some other examples of how you do this in your own daily life that you like appreciate the small things?
Oh, yeah, pretty much just everything. I think it's such a it's like a constant like stream of thought in my head. Um, I think it's a Nick Camarada said this like really incredible thing that I loved, which was very true and applies to me very much, which is that people who are most grateful and like paying attention to small things, they are easily impressed by everything. They're very
Mhm.
easily impressed. They're just like in awe of everything all the time. That's kind of what it is. I'm just super easily impressed by everything. I'm like, you know what's crazy? Like, is that like I get to use my vocal cords that I had no control in building, and I get to speak. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't get to do that, and I get to use these sounds that we ascribed meaning to over centuries, thousands of years, human history. We ascribed abstract concepts to these sounds that we make with our mouths. And then you get a concept in your head. I basically am doing magic. And that's crazy. I don't understand how we figured that out, but that's insane. Especially when they're not things you can point to. Like I can point to that and be like tree, and you're like tree. How the hell am I supposed to explain pride? How do you know what I mean when I say pride or ego or joy or happiness? And in Hindi or Urdu, we have a lot more words than English does for things. Like
Mm.
my favorite thing is that we have so many different words for love. English has one word. English is very boring compared to other languages.
Mhm.
And English's whole thing is stealing from other languages. So I don't know why they don't do a better job of it. But like in Hindi and Urdu, we have ishq, we have muhabbat, we have pyar, we have prem, we have chahat. All of these things are, you know, like nuanced ways of saying different kinds of love, because we
Mm.
recognize that there's different kinds. There's different feelings in your body when you feel them. And I'm very easily impressed by that. I'm like, that's insane. That's
Mm.
crazy that we can just do that. You know, another crazy thing is that I read this incredible quote once, which was that I need to find it, but it was basically how our ancestors over the course of human history had to be smart enough, lucky enough, and attractive enough to keep reproducing and not die in a straight lineage that leads exactly to me, to
Mm.
you, to all of us. Like, we shouldn't be here. Statistically, that's fucking crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Like, there's like a billion and one chance or something that we get to exist. But we're here right now. I think it would be a little batshit if I wasn't constantly in awe of the fact that like I'm just like, yeah, I'm just, you know, gonna go make some coffee because I like to and I can. And I woke up today and what? Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like, I had this insane dream that my brain made up for me, like free entertainment. My dreams are very entertaining. So I just wake up and I'm like, that's great. I get bored super easily. So I find dreams incredible. I wake up and I'm like, I get to have coffee. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, I get to have coffee. And I love coffee. It
Mm.
makes me so happy to have
Mhm.
coffee. I love the bitter taste of it. I just love everything about it. And I think that's why I'm just so in awe of the fact that like we are here. right now. That's crazy. So I can't help but be grateful for every small thing, like, because it doesn't make sense that I should even be here. So if I'm going to be here, I might as well enjoy every second of it whenever I can, and just like try to be as happy as possible all the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you sort of embody these things, because I've seen you write about them, but just hearing you speak about it and seeing your face is just light up as you talk about it is incredibly helpful for like getting that transmission, you know. Um,
I agree.
it reminds me that something I'd be very curious to ask you is like, it sounds like in your experience of gratitude, like there's all of these aspects of your day, from really small things to really big things, that you can sort of reflect on in your mind and appreciate, and that makes you feel good. And it reminds me that I've seen you talk a few times about on Twitter about like not thinking and having an empty head and just like not going into thinking, and the relationship between these two things, between thinking and not thinking, is like one of my recurring interests. So it was a pleasant surprise to see you talk about that, and I would be really curious to hear about your experience of that, of like what the power of not thinking is for you, and how that relates to, say, gratitude, where there is a lot of thinking for you. You're like, oh, I get to have coffee, or you know, whatever it is, how those things relate for you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I don't like I it's like it's a, you know, it's a constant stream of thought. I guess I say that, but it's super embodied at this point. I think the
Mhm.
relationship between thinking and not thinking for me is that I don't notice that I'm doing that anymore.
Mm,
Um, so it's turned into not thinking. Like
mhm,
I've I've repeated that process since I was 6 years old, to the point where now, because it's second nature, there's no inner monologue. It's just vibes. It's just
mhm,
pure vibes. At
totally.
this point, it's just like a part of my body and who I am. So it doesn't take thought anymore. And I think
Mhm,
that's my personal relationship with it. I think so when I'm like, no thoughts, just vibes, like, you know, head empty, like don't think about things. I think that's, it's almost like making space for gratitude to me.
mhm,
Because if you are, it's when I was in New York, like, you know, I felt very important because I was like, I have places to be and like things to do and people to see and like jobs to go to and classes to go to. And, you know, like I was like very, and I liked it. I enjoyed it very much. I liked feeling important in a, you know, while also simultaneously feeling invisible, because there are so many people that no one's paying attention to. And I love that. That was great. It was perfect. But my brain was so full all the time. And when I graduated, I suddenly had all this time. I was like, oh, because I couldn't work also for a few months because I was international. So I was waiting on some visa stuff to come through. So I wasn't legally allowed to do anything at all. And I was like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? I've been having like 14-hour days every single day since I came to NYU. I was a, you know, very much like an overachiever. I was like, I'm doing 3 internships and 2 jobs and like, you know, all this. I'm full-time student. I'm starting a business. Like I was just, I was never home. I went home to sleep and out in the morning at 6 o'clock. Like I was never
mhm.
there. But my brain was so full all the time. It was exhausting. Like I was always tired. I didn't even notice that I was tired because I was on running on 6 cups of coffee every single day. And looking back, I'm like, I don't know how you were doing that. That's a
Yeah.
lot. But when I was in college, I wasn't paying attention to things. I didn't, you know, gratitude happened over the summer because I was free. Because I just had 2 jobs instead of like, you know, 500 things going on. So having 2 jobs meant that I had time to process paying attention to things and like feeling grateful for things. And once I graduated, I had all this free time. I was like, oh, you don't have to think about anything because there's nothing to think about. There's nothing going on. You just get to decide whatever you want to think about. And I'm tired, so I don't really want to think about anything. Like I feel lost and you know, empty, and I don't have anything to hold on to anymore. Like I before I could be like, you know, people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I go to NYU. And then after graduation, they were like, what do you do? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have an identity anymore. Like, what do I do? And all that free time helped me just be like, just no thoughts. Just keep quiet. Um, and that really helped me make space for gratitude and paying attention. And so I think when I'm saying no thoughts, head empty, I'm like, no thoughts, head empty about literally everything else. Like just, it's not necessary. A lot of, we are completely insignificant, and it's very freeing to think of life as yourself in that way. Like I don't matter all that much, and that's great. That means I can do whatever I want. And if I want my brain to be empty, I get to decide that. That's fine. That's great. And honestly, it feels better. I was like very, I was super politically involved and like all of this stuff. And I felt really good and I did it. But it's super easy to get burned out when you're taking on 600 things and your brain's full all the time. That's why I'm like, you gotta take some time to just have no thoughts, because I feel like when you have no thoughts, I, at least for me, gratitude comes in by itself. I don't have to try. It just happens because I'm feeling at peace because I have nothing going on up there. So, I'm just lying in bed and the sun's falling on me and I'm like, wow, this is really nice. I'm not watching anything. I'm not on my phone. I'm just like looking at I'm like lying on the floor or on the bed, just like looking at the ceiling. And I'm like, wow, this is nice. I'm just like existing right now. That's kind of it. Like, I'm just alive. I'm just, no do, just be. I was just being. And that was great. So I think that's my relationship with it.
Oh, I love to hear that, because yeah, I don't experience them as like in conflict, but it's just lovely to hear about your own experience of it and like how they fit together. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I would be curious to ask about more about your coaching and like what you do with people exactly. And I know when I signed up for your coaching, it was like, okay, I want to try this, but I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. And like, it was, very impactful for me. And I would love to hear more about like how you think about what you're doing and like the kinds of problems that clients come to you and with, and that kind of thing. And yeah, what is it that you do in your flirting coaching?
So I say flirting, right? And like that is what I'm doing. But really it's almost therapy adjacent. I like to say that it's therapy adjacent because there's usually blocks that people feel. One of the main things that I realized, I am who I am. I have crushes on everyone all the time. I have a crush on someone 24/7, 365. I am never not crushing on someone because people are great and I can't help it. And I just think everyone's amazing. So I always have different like varying levels of, at any point I probably have 7 crushes on people, right? And I like being that way. That also helps with the no thoughts head empty, because when you like someone, nothing's going on up there. And so the thing is that I realized in college that the only time I felt like pain about an infatuation or a crush or really any relationship at all was when I felt blocked when I wanted to love them. So if something wasn't going well with someone that I was seeing, it wasn't that they were hurting me or anything. It was that I was feeling in some way blocked. Like I was like, I want to show you that I think you're amazing, but I need an appropriate enough relationship with you to be able to do that. And if you're a crush and like we've been on like 2 dates, like you can't do a certain like you might want to do stuff, but it's like that's not appropriate. Don't do that. But you feel kind of blocked, and it's the same with like with really any other relationship. If you have a fight with a friend that like is your best friend, you are feeling blocked in that like you currently don't have the relationship where you can express love to them because you're both mad at each other. And if a loved one dies, you feel blocked forever, which is why you feel grief. Like I can't tell you anymore that I love you. I can't show you anymore that I love you. So what I am aiming to do, hopefully, in these sessions is to unblock the people that come to me, because I think it's very natural to find everything amazing and be in awe of all of it, and find things to love in every person you ever meet. And that doesn't have to mean that you get into their pants or like you get into a relationship with them or they become your best friend. It can literally just be like, I've had amazing friendships with people that I met in the subway once, and then I never saw them again. And then I saw them like a year later on the subway again. They were like, and I was like, what's up? How are you doing? And then we never talked again, but it was amazing. And we cared about each other. We were like, you told me last year that this, and this was happening. And they were like, yeah, and you told me this. And like, how's that going? And it was amazing. It felt incredible. But so it doesn't have to be, like a big thing, but it feels really good. So why wouldn't you? And when you feel unblocked and, feel free to give everybody that kind of attention and love, I think life just gets better and easier, and you find more things to be grateful for, like other people.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think the quality of life increases. You get happier, you get more content, you feel less embarrassed about yourself, because you have to be comfortable with who you are to be able to love other people like that, with like no holds barred, like no reservations. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And that, you know, that depends on the person, like what, you know, what they come in with. And then I try to figure it out. I try to ask questions. We try to dig around a little bit. And depending on the person, like I'll give homework. It's like, oh, it seems like, you know, you're feeling really bogged down with like brain fog and like what's going on in your life. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. Just go on a walk like every day for 15 minutes and don't use your headphones and just like pay attention, like look at what's going on. If you don't want to take a walk, that's fine. Maybe, you know, when you're watching TV, like pay attention to the background. What are you seeing in the background? Like, what's the context for the scene that you're setting in? Just like noticing and practicing paying attention. You get very good at it. Like anything else, it takes practice. And for some people, it like it's also like, you know, depending on gender, depending on like your age, there's so many different things going on. Like mostly for women, I find that the problem is like feeling safe enough to be playful, to be flirtatious, which makes perfect sense. I also understand that. Like you have to feel safe with someone when you're trying to be flirty with them, because flirting with people is intimate. It's actually a very intimate activity. It's very, being playful is intimate. It means that you are, you know, comfortable with who you are, and you're okay with making a fool of yourself and being goofy and like, you know, stupid with someone else. And you're trusting that they're gonna be fine with that. And you're trusting yourself to be fine with that. So it's a very intimate thing, I think, and you need to feel safe. So for, you know, usually when it comes to women, it's about how do I create a space to be safe where I can do this with other people. And for men, um, it's usually how do I fill that space in a way that one makes the other person, and this is heterosexual, of course, but like, how do I fill the space in a way that makes the other person in this particular space like feel safe and reinforce that safety and still be playful in a way that like they can appreciate. And for anyone, queer or heterosexual, whatever, usually the analogy that I use is like flirting is kind of like you're on two sides of like two banks of a river, and like you're trying to get to the other side, but you have to like build a bridge with the other person. You kind of have to ask if they'd even like you to, right?
Mhm.
Like you don't do that without asking if you're trying to get to them. So it's kind of like you put like bricks on each side, and like you're working together to get to the middle with each other. um and good flirting is constantly working with each other on that. Another analogy that I use is it's like having a rally when you're playing like ping pong or badminton or tennis. When you don't drop the ball, it's because you're paying really close attention, right? Like you will drop the ball if you don't pay attention to the other person, like where their hand is and like where they're aiming at. And there's all these calculations that you're doing in your head, but those calculations come very naturally. You don't have to think about them in the moment; they just kind of happen, right? And so it's with flirting is the same. Like it's such a satisfying feeling when you don't drop the ball, either of you, for like a long period of time. And that's how what good flirting feels like when both people are doing a really good job. And it takes a lot of paying attention, and it takes a lot of like practice. You don't get good at rallies until you practice with a lot of people, and everyone's different, so you have to really like work with them. But that's what I'm trying to do, and hopefully like that's what's coming across in my sessions. Like you've had once, like you know what it's kind of like. um, but I just really I just want people to feel sexy and make other people feel great and desired and sexy and desired in a way that isn't just romantic, but like just make them feel like they're special and lovely, because most people are, and it's just nice to feel. If we can just do that for each other, I think we would just like have a it's such a like such a cliche thing. It's just like I just want people to love each other, but I do. I think that like if you flirt with everyone, you're loving each other all the time, and I think that that's pretty noble activity to do with their life. It doesn't have to be your main goal in your life, right? But it can be the way that you move through life, which is not bad. It'd be one of the things that you do with your life. I think it's a good goal to have.
Definitely, definitely. I'm all about it. It's been so lovely to explore that for myself through what you've shared, and part of why I'm wanting to share this with the world. So is there anything that's like near the things that we've talked about that feels important to share that like you might want to mention while we're still talking?
I think a lot of my talking points just kind of like move into each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of it is like, attention is intimacy, and it creates joy, and paying attention to small things creates joy. And I think the ultimate goal of my life, I think, is to just, my greatest project is my life. My greatest ambition is my life. And mostly when I'm talking about any of this stuff, or I'm, working with people or whatever, I kind of all just boils down to the fact that, like, I have been showered with kindness and love and such immense amounts of luck, and like people have loved me, and other people are the reason that I'm alive. If it were up to me, it might be kind of hard to keep being here, but they're the reason that I'm here. So really, I just want other people to feel that way because of me. Feels a little bit selfish, but like that's kind of the underlying foundation for all of this, is that, like, other people made me feel loved and seen and heard and solid, and like I was a real person that mattered. And if I can do that for like one other person, I'm done. And so far, I think I have done that, at least with my friends. So I am, my goal was one person. So I've overshot that by a lot of people. And that's great. Like, I'm just like overjoyed by that like I've been able to do that for at least more than one person. And that's amazing. But I think that's just what underlines all of it for me, is that I just really want people to feel good in their bodies and like in their lives, even for like the 3 minutes that we get to meet and then I never see them again. I would just really like it if they felt good. That's kind of it. And so with the flirting, it's like, if I can teach you to make other people feel good, that's amazing. I would love to do that. Like, that would be an insane amount of like, domino effect. Like, that would be like, I was amazed that people wanted to do that in the first place. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. If I can reverse engineer this way of being and like help you be that, absolutely, sign me up. 100%. I'm so grateful that like that's something that I am getting to do now. And like, and people are enjoying it and coming back to me with like, yeah, that was super helpful. Like, I feel like I can love people a little bit more and I feel less blocked. And I'm like, that's great. Oh my God. So like, yeah, I think that's kind of really it. Is that it all ties into that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing that just now, and also for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, and I've just learned so much from you, and it's lovely to hear more from you and to share that with the world. So thank you for your time and your wisdom and your generosity.
You're too kind, too much. I'm so grateful to be here. I am a very big fan of you as a person, so I'm just like really happy that you wanted me to come on and talk about stuff that I care about and listen. And wow, thank you. You're great. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome.